dispute between the president-elect of the U.S. and Mexico's president over a phone call. Who agreed to what and what it may mean for the U.S.-Mexico relationship. Donald Trump brought out some of his best words, for example, wonderful, to describe a conversation with Mexico's Claudia Sheinbaum, ending his Truth Social post by claiming she agreed to, quote, stop migration through Mexico and into the United States. Sheinbaum actually just responded moments ago, and the short version is never, no, not once, did she say anything of the kind. Sheinbaum on X was writing, we reiterate that Mexico's position is not to close borders, but to build bridges between governments and between peoples. Joining us in our fifth seat, CNN media correspondent Hadass Gold. But first, we're going to go to Lance on this breaking news because it does kind of feel familiar from Trump 45. These initial kind of back and forth phone calls, interactions with other world leaders that sort of we hear one version of it and then we hear another version of it.
Yeah, I think the big difference is Donald Trump has got a pretty big mandate, particularly when it comes to this border and getting fentanyl under control in this country. So that, to me, is the big difference from 2017. And I don't think that any country, Mexico especially, should underestimate Americans' tolerance for when it comes to getting the border under control and to getting fentanyl under control. I can remember being on the campaign trail. You meet families who have they've lost children to this fentanyl. It is an epidemic across this country. And look, if you look back at the polling, the border was the #2 issue consistently in every single poll. Donald Trump was leading.
But this isn't a debate here about whether or not it needs to be done. It's him telling a world leader, telling us that a world leader said it was going to be closed. You probably remember this from the first round of Trump, right? Where we would find out there was a very beautiful phone call, and maybe we'd hear another version of the call.
And one thing that always stuck out to me in those years was hearing from the reporters who covered Trump. I think Maggie Haberman said this well. Whenever she was reporting on something that happened in Trump world, she would sort of take what everybody would say and almost put it through a cheesecloth and try to get through the truth of what came out of that, the sort of what was alike in all of those statements, to try to get to the truth. Because often we would hear of these differing sort of statements from different world leaders, from what the president would say, from what the world leaders would say. And that was sort of the difficulty in covering Trump, but also made it a bit more, I guess, chaotic and exciting in certain ways.
So also fascinating that Sheinbaum, who's a relatively new leader, used X.
Yeah, when I first read this earlier this evening, I was hoping it was true, right? I was hoping that all these things that were in there, fentanyl and a great relationship with the Mexico president, but history's a great predictor of the future. And Donald Trump does this too often. He splashes magic pixie dust on the page, and it really doesn't come to be true. And we need to take this serious. This mandate from the voters was, we've got to take the border serious. But I really look at this as a two-pronged issue. We can't just take the border seriously without talking about immigration. Right? I just don't think we can have that honest conversation. And if Donald Trump just hones this moment and he focuses in on trying to figure out where those illegal folks that are here, that are committing crimes, where they're at, then we can actually have a substantive conversation. But instead, he's just going to gallivant around and act like he's playing global pit boss.
Anyone else?
No, I think that that's true. And Trump is trying to rule with a stick and not a carrot. And we've seen this time and time again. He is out here trying to strong-arm a leader, particularly a female leader. And he is known for saying things that, quite frankly, are not true. We'll never see the transcript of that call. We'll never, you can say it's he said, she said, but we've seen time and time again where Trump will say something that happened in a call that is absolutely not true about that call. What we know from Mexico is that, quite frankly, they have not been good faith partners when it comes to immigration reform or reductions at the border or being honest about the fentanyl crisis or the caravans or anything else. Like, they have just not been helpful. But I do think that with this, with Donald Trump being president again, he has the opportunity to try to bridge some of this. He has the opportunity to be honest, not like he was about the border wall, which he said that they agreed to pay for and they didn't do that either. He has the opportunity to actually work and ensure that we do get to some resolution. But honestly, this is going to come from Congress as well. When we talk about the crime, we have to be honest about the fact that a lot of the crime stats that Donald Trump has pushed out in the Republican Party have, quite frankly, been lies. The numbers aren't nearly as big as he would like to say that they are. And when we talk about the fentanyl crisis, we have to be honest that a lot of Americans are driving the fentanyl crisis, not people across the border.
But I think the thing that's intriguing me is you have two new leaders, and you have a world that is far more sort of familiar with the tactics of a Donald Trump, right? Like, now you know, if you go into a room with him, what you can or should do after you leave that room if you're another world leader.
All of these leaders negotiate through media to some degree. So we should separate the public statements from what's probably going on behind the scenes. They may be testing each other to see how they react to Trump's characterization of the meeting, because that's a sign of whether his leverage is working behind the scenes. So I don't think you should read too much into these public statements, because at the end of the day, this is just a negotiation. It's brinkmanship.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, no one was on this phone call, so no one knows exactly what happened. But that, to my original point, the one thing he comes in with is, to me, a lot more of a mandate. And I just think the folks in Mexico need to be thinking long and hard about what he's willing to do, especially as somebody who doesn't have to run for office.
She has her own mandate, right? Those are the dynamics we don't know anything about.
Absolutely. I get it. She needs to talk tough. But, I mean, I think this is an issue where the American people are lock solid. And they're
the Americans that voted for him in the middle are expecting him to do something, not just build 20 miles of a wall for a selfie station.
Bakari, I mean, it was interesting when Trump came out with that post. He made it sound as though he had solved the immigration crisis and what's happening down at the border. And the president of Mexico had a very different characterization.
Yeah, and I just think that this is going to be somewhat typical of the next 4 years of the Trump administration. It's something that we see on X a lot, which has really become this kind of very, very, in terms of intellectual honesty, very shallow. But President Sheinbaum, in her response, ran circles around the incoming 47th president of the United States, talking about the agreements that Mexico has already made and the reduction that we've seen of border crossings and the things they're already doing. And she's going to be more than a formidable foe for Donald Trump. But I would tell people who are watching, and sometimes we don't do this, but Donald Trump is going to claim credit and then send a tweet out without actually doing anything, and claiming some victories or success. That is who he is, and that's who he's always been. He has not solved anything yet, although he's claimed victory. And so this is going to be something that's happening. And this is why journalism matters and people like you matter, Jim, because you're going to have to turn the page and be able to show people that, look, I mean, just because you tweet it and say it doesn't mean anything. I tweet the fact that I should be in the NBA all the time, but I ain't there.
Yeah, I would love that, too. I would love to be in the NBA. But, Scott, let me ask you, does this mean that if we start to see, migration coming across the border during a second Trump term, that means that this tweet from him this post is no longer operative? What does that mean? Does that mean he didn't solve it or she didn't solve it? What does that mean?
I'll tell you what this whole thing means to me. First of all, it was interesting to hear Bakari describe the president of Mexico as a formidable foe. I don't think we ought to have to think of Mexico as a foe, although we currently should, because they've been a terrible neighbor. And I think he got her attention this week with his threat of tariffs. And she clearly hopped on the phone with him. And that's a good thing. She needs to pay attention to Donald Trump. And they need to pay attention to the United States. They have an important economic relationship with us, but they've been a terrible neighbor. And they do need to do more in terms of migration and drugs. This poison comes across the border. It kills Americans. And so I'm glad they talked. And I know that they're both doing their own public posturing for their own political purposes, but they have an important role to play. And I don't think they've done near enough to do what they can do to help the United States solve this crisis. So we'll see how it turns out. But there's a lot of things yet to happen. Trump hasn't even taken office yet, and he's already got the attention of both Mexico and Canada in a way that I don't think Joe Biden ever did.
But Lee, I guess, Bakari, if you want a quick response to that.
Oh, it's Lee's show. I think that irresponsible fiscal policy is something that we'll be able to discuss for a long period of time. If anybody thinks 25% tariffs on anything is good policy, and yes, she is a formidable foe. It's a colloquialism that means somebody who's going to be able to go back and forth with the president of the United States, not any type of other characterization. But Scott knows that.
And Leah, I guess just to go back to you finally on this. I mean, the flip side of this is that when Trump comes into office, if these tariffs do go into effect, I mean, the president of Mexico has threatened to retaliate. We could have a trade war at the beginning of this new administration, which could have a pretty serious effect on inflation in this country. And that's what a lot of economic experts are saying right now. What do you think?
Exactly. And I think one of the things that we're seeing right now is a little bit of saber rattling and a little bit of, I think, to Scott and Bakari's point, is a little bit of posturing. And that the ultimate outcome is that nobody really wants a trade war. Nobody wants a tariff war. Nobody wants to be, clearly the American public was very open and very transparent that they are tired of really high inflation. And that also includes inflation that went into effect roughly around 2019 from earlier tariffs that were put into place that the Biden administration didn't overturn, but also contributed and gotten worse due to the global pandemic. So I honestly think that part of what this is designed to do is to create, a leverage moment, a moment of negotiation. And they're putting the cards on the table before Donald Trump has even gotten into office. What I would really be curious to see ultimately is where the negotiation ends up, in large part because Donald Trump does not want massive inflation. He just doesn't. It's not a politically good thing. It's also economically not a good thing. So what does the actual breakdown look like in the end?